Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I think to help us set a context for this conversation, because unfortunately, it feels like we keep revisiting the same issues they didn't begin today, but we need a proper historical context as to how did we get here? What were the initial causes of the insecurity in the Middle Belt?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, viewers. The trajectory of our collective misery as a nation is that, in the words of Thomas Jefferson, he said, all human beings are created equal and that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Among them are right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Conversely, in the Middle Belt, we are, in the words of Franz Fanon, the wretched of the earth. That is simply because the life of a Middle Beltan has been reduced to a mere statistical figure. For instance, remember what happened in Uromi, sadly, and it stands condemnable, where 16 hunters allegedly were massacred. And juxtapose that with the killing of about 200 persons in Bokos. And what happened in Nagatu, what happened in Bassa. And when you look at the screaming headlines across the globe condemning what happened in Uromi, juxtapose it with the grave silence over the carnage on the Plateau and in Benue, it tells you that to a very large extent what life really amounts to between these two sides of this same nation. Really, it's something that we really need to reflect on.
So when you say silence, where would you say the silence is coming from?
When I say the silence, the point is this. When you look at the screaming headlines about what happened in Uromi, the entire nation was gripped with so much fear that you could almost feel the tension across the nation, condemnation coming from, reputable personalities such as the Sultan of Sokoto and many, prominent northerners condemning what happened in Uromi. But when it happens on the Plateau, when it happens in Benue, when it happens in the entirety of the Middle Belt, there is what? Grave silence from the northern oligarchy. Well, let me just take you down a memory lane. Between the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, there were Quranic schools in the entirety of the North. But particularly between 1965 to the late 70s, Middle Eastern Muslims came and recruited Nigerians to be indoctrinated into the philosophy and ideology of Said Qutb in Egypt, in Cairo of Egypt. And beyond that, there were those who also subscribed to the philosophy and the ideology of Mauludi Maudidi. And it is all built on how to create an Islamic state. When those people came back within the early 80s, that was when the Metasini religious aberrations commenced. Now, when you look at the pattern of everything that has happened, particularly within the Middle Belt, from the Metasini religious interruptions right up to Kalakato, to the Boko Haram insurgency, to the banditry in Northwest, right up to the recent one we have, is it Lakurawa? We now have another one, Mahmuda, Fulani herdsmen. All of the attacks are so coordinated in a manner that it's targeted towards what? Ethnic cleansing to reclaim land, including the Sharia imposition in most parts of northern Nigeria during the Obasanjo era. Now, the point is this: the version of Islam that these people went and were indoctrinated in, it's built on how to establish an Islamic state. And how do you establish an Islamic state? You establish an Islamic state through indoctrination, indoctrinating your followers, just like Yusuf, the erstwhile, or rather the departed founder of Boko Haram, comments. When he started in Maiduguri, he was what? Teaching them as a sheikh or as a Muslim or Islamic scholar. He was indoctrinating them into the philosophies and the ideologies of how to create an Islamic state. Now, when that failed, they now began to what? Use their disciples who have infiltrated either the ranks or institutions of government to either use those institutions, be it the police, be it the army, be it the judiciary, be it the legislature, be it even the executive, to what? Enhance and what? Bring about the creation of an Islamic state through their actions and inactions. When that fails, they now begin to compromise institutions of state to now make way for that creation to take place. And when it fails, the last option left to them is jihad. And when I want, by all these things that I've mentioned, I want to place it in a context that everyone will understand.
Because of time constraints, we would like you to move forward, because we have quite a lot of questions to ask you.
So fundamentally, when you look at the Sharia imposition in the North, it was what used by governors who were occupying what? Offices, or political offices that were now using that to now bring about what? The imposition of an extremely theocratic state that is completely antithetical to the secularity of the Nigerian constitution.
In summary, would I be right to say the crisis we're witnessing today in the Middle Belt is as a result of this and more, not just firmer header crisis?
Not at all.
Now let's look at, I'm sure there's a saying that when you keep doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same results, it's insanity. And we've been having intermittent crises over the last years. These attacks come, they go, and the security forces have not been able to nip it in the bud once and for all. But there's something we haven't heard recently, we haven't heard in a long time, that has come up in our political discourse, and military analysts have also said. We'd had former Chief of Army Staff, General T.Y. Danjuma, he said, look, self-defense, there's been talks of self-defense. Do you think, what do you make of this, and will it turn the tide when the people say enough is enough? We're not sitting ducks, you're not going to keep attacking us and killing us, we have to do something about it. And what dangers and fears do you have for that when the government is saying, look, you have to help yourself, that haven't helped those who help themselves?
Well, Nigeria is primarily a secular state, and based on the principles
constitutionally a secular state.
That's right. And based on the principles of liberal democracy, equity, fairness, justice, freedom, liberty are the democratic tenets that defines a secular or a democratic state. Now, when you are now faced with an existential threat, where first and foremost you are being killed, and those who survive are displaced, those communities are being inhabited by the same attackers, and government looks away, security agencies look away, and they even know where these people, the basis from where they orchestrate these attacks. They know the camps that these attacks are being orchestrated from. Because we're talking about people invading communities, riding over 100 motorcycles. So you can't tell me that they are spirits. They pass through different routes, and there are security agencies. Now the thing is this, even the Director General of the DSS came out to say that self-defense is the last option that we're left with. But let me ask you this fundamental question. By the time you decimate a community, you completely annihilate them from their ancestral lineage.
Who's left to defend?
That you don't even allow them to go to farm. So by virtue of all these attacks, you've crippled them economically, you have depopulated them, and at the end of the day, if you say this will defend themselves, where do they even acquire sophisticated arms that would match the firepower of what these assailants come with?
It also sends a message that might is right. So if they override your community, they've won. So, I mean, you said defend, it was a battle, and the stronger side would always win, which is not fair, and negates the principles of natural justice. Yeah.
But the point is this: Nigeria has never accepted it as a failed state. If the government has come out to admit that Nigeria has failed as a state, and we have fallen to the Hobsonian state, where life is brutish and short, dog eats dog, then that is where, of course, we could ordinarily, that argument could hold sway. But the Nigerian government still maintains that Nigeria is not failing. The security agencies keep assuring us that they can rise up to the task. And let me be frank with you, this is a situation where all the barbarity and the absurdities within the Middle Belt have been so normalized, such that it is no longer about what is right or wrong, but certainly just tacit approval by state. For instance, let me ask one question. When anything happens, for instance, in the Northeast, you see the aggression with which the Nigerian armed state confronts that agitation or that aggression. But when it happens in other parts of the country, all of a sudden our military becomes a weakling, the intelligence gathering mechanism becomes completely porous, as if Nigeria, like you stated, is failing. But the thing is this, by the time you say every citizen should up arms to defend themselves, then has the Nigerian government failed in its constitutional responsibility? Because Section 14p stipulates that the welfare and the security of the people shall be the primary purpose of government, without which it loses its legitimacy. So are we saying that Nigeria has failed as a nation state, so that it is now the responsibility of citizens to either defend themselves or they die?
When you say the government here, which of the government are you referring
I'm talking about, when I'm talking about the government, of course I'm talking about the federal government.
Okay. You don't think that the state government has...
No, it does. It does. But the point is this. The state governor, for instance, does not appoint the commissioner of police. He does not give orders to the IG. The instructions flow from top to bottom.
Top to the bottom. Okay, let's look at this. I'd like us to look at this practically. Would you say that the people of the Middle Belt are aware of the perpetrators of these acts?
Yes.
That's one.
Yes.
I'd like you to answer that. Secondly,
yes.
There are concerns that this fight is not just about Islamatizing, in quotes, you know, the Middle Belt and so on. It's also about mineral resources. So where do you stand with this conversation? Are you saying that it's a case of, you know, putting an Islamic state, that's why we're having this, because that's what you've said?
Yeah.
Or is it a case of, oh, there's a lot of natural resources, minerals, that needs to be claimed? That's why when they chase them out of the place, they have a territory there, and it shows that they own that space. So let me break the question down to you. Do they know the perpetrators? Secondly,
yes.
Is it a fight of being an Islamic state, or it's a fight of mineral resources?
Number one, let me correct okay, first and foremost, to answer the first question, we know who these attackers are, and it is principally and fundamentally the Fulani terrorists that are wreaking havoc on our land. And secondly, there is no any fight. It's a genocide. Because these are innocent, peace-loving, armless citizens in their homes that are being butchered, being gruesomely murdered. And we have mass graves all over the length and breadth of the Middle Belt. That is a testament to what? The bloodletting and how they have turned the serene atmosphere into a theater of bloodshed. Now, how could you be in your own home? You are attending even a funeral, and armed assailants come riding motorcycles, and then they kill children, ripped up, I mean, pregnant women, children that are just maybe 2 or 3 years, still sucking their mother's breast, are torn into shreds. We have old parents who can barely even walk, being macheted, butchered as if they are even less than animals. How do you call that a fight? And in any case, if there is going to be a clash between you and I, then there should be casualties on both sides. But in this case, you come into a community, for instance. Imagine the Christmas Eve attacks that happened on the Plateau in Mangu. Over 400 people died. Not even one of the assailants was apprehended. At the end of the day, not even one arrest has been made till this moment that we're talking about. Not even one arrest. I've granted an interview on Arise TV, and I gave a geographical location of the base from which these attacks are being orchestrated.
So is it far from where the people live, or have they put up a settlement?
There is a place called Mahanga, which lies at the valley bordering Bokos in Plateau State and Wamba in Nasarawa State to the south.
Is there any security garrison or security presence?
The point is, it is a community that it is a community from which it is an autonomous community that is inhabited by the Fulani, and it's there these attacks are being launched. And this has actually, the security agencies are aware.
That was going to be my
They do.
Yeah.
Because I've granted an interview on Arise TV, and I mentioned this. Nobody has come out to debunk that. And it is a fact. Aeroplanes are even, helicopters even land there to give arms.
Who do you think? I mean, it's one thing for us to mention a few persons, but we'd like us to be specific. Because, of course, this is national TV. Yeah. Whatever statement is made is coming from what you know.
Yeah.
So who do you think are operating these helicopters? Who do you think are supporting these assailants? who do you think is supporting what you call, quote unquote, re-echoing the words of the Plateau State governor, a genocide? Who do you think is behind all of this?
President Goodluck Jonathan, during his time as president, alluded to the fact that there are Boko Haram sympathizers, those who are funding Boko Haram in his cabinet. Commander Olaomi has come out on several media broadcasts, and he has stated that over 300 names of financiers of terror in Nigeria has been submitted to the federal government. Up till today, have they been able to name one? And the point is this: when I mention that there is a surreptitious and a grand design to establish an Islamic State, it's a very pregnant statement. It's just that there's no time to go into the nitty-gritty of that. But all of them know what we're talking about. So the thing is this: there is complicity by the state. And that is why I told you that those who have been indoctrinated into that philosophy or that ideology, it is either they use the instruments of state to what? To facilitate that agenda, or they what? Cripple or undermine it. For instance, imagine there are instances, an attack, for instance, the Christmas Eve attack that happened on the Plateau. About 37 distress calls was received by the Joint Task Force.
How many?
Operation. 37 distress calls that was received by the Operation Safe Haven or the Joint Task Force. Yet nobody ever responded to that until this attack lasted for over 12 hours. And how many people were killed? Over 200 people were killed. And at the end of the day, it was after the killing spree, all the attackers have all left. That is when security arrives. They are working they are complicit.
No, but Doctor, we've had change of personnel.
Yes.
Chief of Army, Navy, Air Staff. We've also had change of government. So are you saying, regardless of who the headman, who's in charge, this agenda will still happen? Because we've been seeing these attacks. They've not abated since the time of President Goodluck Jonathan to the 8 years of the Buhari presidency. We're seeing it now. So change of personnel doesn't change the situation on the ground.
Violence has always been the last option for state capture. And why do you think the North always comes to the table with violence whenever it wants power? It's because, for instance, we have a government, a southern president, but who put him there? On whose back did he ride to become president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria? So the point is this: he who pays the piper dictates the tune. And to be very, very honest, the lack of political will you see manifest in almost all strata of governance in this state is simply because of the fact that they are part and parcel of the evil at one point or the other.
I want to take you back on a statement you made just a short while ago, saying the North always rides to power at the back of violence. I think that's a very strong statement.
Yes.
And the North is not one monolithic block that you could classify as one. There are Christians in the North, there are minority groups and all of that. So what evidence do you have to say Nigeria contested elections? People voted in different parts of the country that they rode on the back of violence. When President Buhari became president, people voted in Osun, in Ekiti, in different parts of it, in Calabar, for him. So I want you to
react to that.
When I talk of the North, I'm talking about the oligarchic North. First and foremost, I needed to have established this. The Middle Belt region, it's a conglomeration of independent ethnic nationalities that are independent of the rulership of the Sokoto Caliphate or the Sultanate of Borno when the British came in 1900. So when I'm talking of the Middle Belt, I'm talking of Southern Kebbi, I'm talking about Southern Borno, I'm talking about Southern Yobe, talking about Southern Bauchi, talking about Southern Kaduna, talking about Gombe, I'm talking about Plateau, I'm talking about Benue, I'm talking about Taraba, I'm talking about Nasarawa, I'm talking about the FCT, I'm talking about Kogi, I'm talking about Kwara, I'm talking about Niger. Now, these are the states that make up the Middle Belt. So when I'm talking about the North, I'm talking about the oligarchic North. So the oligarchic North I'm referring to is composed of two major proponents. That's the Sultanate of Borno and the Sokoto Caliphate, which is principally or primarily made up of the Fulani and the Kanuri. Now, I want you to understand that when we talk of the North coming to the table for negotiation using violence, I am not a prophet of doom, but in the build-up to the 2027 election, you're going to see more of these attacks, and they are going to focus more in the middle belt. I'm not a prophet of doom, but it's something I know.
And this is something that you're not the only one who has expressed.
And government would always look away.
We've had several guests on this show. Yeah. Last week, I believe, we had Mr. Onekachi Adekoya, who was very keen on the fact that the bulk of the blame does not stop at the foot of the president, that we're all very quick to shout, President, President, he's the chief security officer, but asking what has the governors, or what have the governors of these states done to secure their people. We see other states where they put together some security apparatus to ensure that, yes, it's not the official one, but they can look after. We've seen it with BDK, we've seen Amotekun, and so the question is, do the governors have a role to play in all of this, or can we entirely just have to rest everything at the foot of the president? What role do the governors have to play in this?
They have a very, very strategic role and a fundamental role that has actually even been entrusted on them by the Constitution. As the governor of a state, you're the chief security officer of that state, and that's why you're giving security votes. And the security vote is supposed to go into what? Assisting the security apparatus to what? Build a security architecture that is formidable to at least, first and foremost, even gather intelligence and then be proactive rather than reactive to all the madness we see. However, it still boils down to the political maneuvering and the configuration of the state. For instance, while we're burying over 200 of our citizens on the plateau, from Bokos to Bassa, we're now shocked with government coming to talk of investigating the poisoning of 30 cows. I believe you've read all of those commentaries. Now, how does the life of 30 cows equals or even supersedes that of 200 lives? Have we ever heard, even in Benue State, sorry to say this, because we have to be unapologetic about the truth, because this country has been built on a lot of lies, and the fact is this, those lies have expired. The governor of Benue State is even to a large extent trying to, euphemize and reduce the magnitude of the tragedy that has been unleashed on innocent people in Benue State, trying to make it look like it's a skirmishes, some little disagreement between farmers and herders. Meanwhile, this is genocide, even reducing the numbers deliberately. So the point is this: when governors do not rise to the occasion and face it with the boldness that it requires, then something is wrong. And one thing I want you to understand is this: the domination and the overbearing influence of the northern oligarchy on even governors within the Middle Belt, to a large extent, undermines their capacity to face the lethal threat that these armless and defenseless citizens of their states are going through. Because the thing is this: how will I, ordinarily as a governor, be burying 400 people? This week I buried 200, the next week I bury 100. And yet I would be talking about the fact that criminality has no ethnicity.
But it's been happening for years, number of years. Now, if you could paint a picture, what needs to stop the senseless killings and this cycle of violence, what will it take, and what type of picture would you paint for us?
Number one, Nigeria as a nation has almost become more of a contraption where leaders have never embarked on a march to really make this a nation. A nation is a conglomeration of people who are bound by a common interest and a shared destiny. So whatever they do, either in their public or private lives, is tilted towards the actualization or arriving that destination. For instance, look at America. What is the ethic of the American society? Liberty. For instance, liberty, freedom, all this encapsulate the ethos of the American society. Everybody wants to be free. Everybody wants to be able to pursue happiness. Everybody wants to what? Be able to have, I mean, just like Barack Obama could, from Kenya, having an African ancestry, get to be president of the United States. That is a nation that is founded on liberty, on freedom, on equality, on justice and equity. However, do we have any common ethic that unites us as a nation? And the thing is this. As long as this nation, as long as this country...
I want you to get to my...
I am getting there right now. As long as we continue just as...
As we're doing now?
No. The point is not just as we're doing now. Because one, we just actually matched together. We didn't decide
describe Nigeria
as a major geographical expression. Yeah. Even Ahmadu Bello described it as a mistake of 1914. Because as far as is concerned, the amalgamation dislocated the North from its past, proud Islamic past. And beyond this, I want you to understand that certain foundational fault lines that we hardly would want to engage because of political correctness, I'm still answering your question, is the fact that the Emirate system, which gave the British the bushel with which to house indirect rule, was actually nurtured to be the vehicle that will drive Nigeria upon achieving independence in 1960. So the point is this, as far as Nigeria is concerned, we are not a nation that has a common destiny. So the point is this, if we're a nation that has a common destiny, you, a Yoruba man in the southwest, would be concerned about anything that happens to any Nigerian, not minding the creed.
I mean, a lot of Nigerians
not minding the creed, the religion, whether the person is black, he's white, no matter how he looks like. But the point is this: when anything happens in the southeast, and I say, oh, it's the Igbos, let them deal with it. Anything happens in the west, oh, it's the Yorubas, let them deal with it. Anything happens in the middle, it's their own problem, let them deal with it.
Unfortunately, the last elections did show how very divided we are on ethnic lines. Dr. Stanley Kawam, thank you very much for your time.